The European Union is falling apart. Britain was the first piece to break off, and, well, there are a few other pieces that are probably going to be kicked out at the rate that things are going, in fact. And, again, it's because of wokeness. Like, I'm sorry to continually hammer the point that wokeness is divisive and ruining everything, but it really is, and it all seems to be traced back to this civic religion, right? So the European Union leaders have condemned Hungary following its introduction of grotesque new legislation banning the promotion of homosexuality to those under the age of 18. I mean, they're a conservative country. What did they think they were thinking about this?
Get Eastern Europe into the European Union. What are their views? Don't worry about it. We'll get to that later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what from the Hungarian perspective, we want you in the European Union. Why? So we can teach your kids to be gay.
Yeah, not a great sell.
Not a good sell, right? But in a joint declaration, in a letter, published by Luxembourg's Prime Minister Xavier Bettel, 17 European Union leaders pledged to continue fighting against discrimination towards the LGBTI community, while affirming that respect and tolerance were at the core of the European project. That's why the fascists were all for it, is it? Is that really it? But anyway, the joint declaration was written in Belgium, and they expressed their grave concern about the adoption by the Hungarian parliament of amendments which discriminate against LGBTQI persons and violate the right to freedom of expression under the pretext of protecting children. The European Union doesn't believe in freedom of expression.
No.
You look at their charter on it.
Article 10, you have the freedom of expression. Point 2, unless you don't.
Yeah, it's literally, you don't care about freedom of expression.
Unless the law says you don't, then you don't.
And you get people like Merkel saying exactly those sort of things. So don't give me that nonsense. You're hiding behind someone else's ideals. But arguing that the laws would stigmatize LGBTQ people, the declaration labeled the legislation as a flagrant form of discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, deserving of condemnation. Inclusion, human dignity, and equality are core values of the European Union, and we cannot compromise on those principles. Okay, well then you're going to start losing the conservative sections of the European Union, then, aren't you? Like, what do you expect to happen? Beyond the discussions taking place in the General Affairs Council, we urge the European Commission, as guardian of the treaties, to use all of the tools at its disposal to ensure full respect for EU law. Hence why the EU is awful. Hungary's Foreign Minister, Peter... I can't pronounce that.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Szijjarto.
Zajata?
Let's go with that.
Yep. Said the new legislation, characterised by Ursula von der Leyen as a shame, as it was exclusively aimed at stamping out paedophilia. Again, sounding a lot like the...
So the original legislation was aimed at
Section 28, basically.
Pedo stuff, and the EU's like, no.
People kept complaining that they were getting pedo content being taught in schools, and this was how they had to stamp it out. Legislation passed by the Hungarian parliament in recent weeks included a bill outlawing LGBT people from featuring on TV shows for under 18s. Don't get me wrong, I think this might be going a bit far. Which featured a ban on adverts showing support for the LGBT community. Again...
what do you mean by that?
Yeah, what does LGBT mean in this context?
Do you mean any character can't be a homosexual on TV, or do you mean LGBT as in LGBT ideology?
As in the pride flag and all that sort of nonsense.
Like the entire person is just their sexuality.
Yeah. And again, it's only targeting under 18s. So kids' TV shows and adverts for toys. So, I mean, I
to be honest, I kind of if they just rewrote this and said anything to do with sexuality for under 18s, kids shows is banned. Yeah. They'd be like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, there's passed with 157 votes in favour and 1 vote against in their parliament. So the Hungarians are very much in favour of this by their elected representatives. And
I'm not too sure how Hungarian's parliament works. Like, is it a bit finicky? Like,
I honestly don't know enough about Hungary's parliament, but I mean, it seems to be a democracy. Like, Orban has spent like 8 years out of power and then got back into power by getting elected. He was elected, then he was unelected, then he was elected again, and the BBC call him an autocrat. It's like, it's just not how autocracy works.
Was it one of his friends that got into power in those years?
No, it was the opposition party.
That doesn't sound like dictatorship.
No, it's not a dictatorship. At least not by any rational standard. But again, it's highly corrupt. I'm not saying it's not a corrupt state, but I mean, both parties will be corrupt, obviously.
It's European.
Eastern European, yeah. What do you expect?
I just think European.
Post-communist countries are corrupt. Breaking news. But anyway, they say, the specifically should not be aimed at promoting gender segregation, gender reassignment, or homosexuality.
Okay, the gender reassignment thing I absolutely agree with.
Well, of course.
You should not be trying to reassign someone's gender under 18.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got to remember they're a very Christian conservative country. The fact that they're not just outlawing homosexuality is probably a massive step up. In order to ensure the protection of children's rights...
It's a low bar.
Sure, but look at most of the world. Like I was saying this to my wife the other day. She's like, I can't believe that abortion is illegal. And I'm like, abortion is illegal in most places. Like, we're very progressive in the West. But they say, in order to ensure the protection of children's rights, pornography and content that depicts sexuality for its own purposes or that promotes deviation from gender identity, gender reassignment, and homosexuality shall not be made available to persons under the age of 18. Honestly, I don't even think that's very aggressive.
I think it's not going far enough. I think it should ban all sexuality for under 18 content.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's a bad
Straight
idea.
and gay, why not?
But this incensed the Dutch PM. Hungary has no place in the EU anymore. Well, if I'm not allowed to preach gender transitioning to your children, get out. So, okay, calm down.
I love the idea that Hungarians are in parliament, like, oh yes, we will pass this law to stop paedophiles, and the Dutch PM's like, well, if I'm not welcome...
Yeah, but the age of consent in Holland's something like 14, I think.
So, yeah, he's not welcome.
So he's not welcome.
Get out.
Hungary has got no place in the European Union after passing this bill. Earlier this month, blah, blah. So he says, for me, Hungary has no place in the EU anymore, Rutte said. But unfortunately, in the system we have, I can't do it on my own. With the other 26 member states saying you have to leave, this has to happen step by step, and in the meantime, you hope they will adapt. So literally, he's going to get everyone else in the EU to kick Hungary out.
Not going to happen.
Because they won't allow them to be gay.
You think the Poles are going to agree to that? Slovaks?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute, right? If you think they're not getting kicked out, you're wrong, right? Orban, of course, defended himself, saying, look, this is not about homosexuals, it's about kids and their parents. And their parents are saying, don't propagandize my children with homosexuality or transgenderism.
I'm a little bit sus about the homosexual stuff. Like, did he say that in English or did he say it in Hungarian?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's always important.
I imagine he said whatever he said in Hungarian.
He does speak English. I've seen him speaking English.
As I would expect. But I am a fighter for
as a civilized person.
Yeah, I am a fighter for their rights. I am a freedom fighter in the communist regime. Homosexuality was punished and I fought for their freedom and their rights, so I'm defending the rights of homosexual guys, but this law is not about that. It's about defending the rights of kids and their parents. And I actually I can understand where he's coming from here. Because, I mean, like, nothing is this about adults who are homosexual. There's nothing to do with that. It's about propagandizing children. And if there's one thing that I personally have learned from watching the left propagandize my own children, is I would ban this stuff too.
It's Nickelodeon. I mean, just
my 11-year-old daughter should not be coming home from school saying I'm bisexual now. She doesn't know what sexuality is. She doesn't know what bisexuality is. She doesn't need to know.
Yeah. Never mind, I'm a man.
Never mind, I'm a man, and having hormone therapy and cutting off her breasts and stuff like this. It's obvious that there is something deeply subversive going on with left-wing ideology, and I don't blame the Hungarians for banning it at all. But of course, Ursula von der Leyen was like, "Oh, this goes against all our fundamental values." Worried about your...
Again, I imagine just the guys in the Hungarian parliament are like, yes, ban paedophilia, and the EU is like, goes against EU's fundamental values. Wait, what? What did we join?
I mean, it's a French and German project, so what do you expect? Anyway, so Fidesz is Hungary's ruling party. Fidesz is apparently moving even further in this direction. This is characterized by Reuters as moving against the LGBT community, which I don't think is a very fair way of characterizing it. But yeah, so this latest bill, right? Yeah,
that's not what I want the face of gay toleration to be. That's
No.
not going to help the movement.
People in suits would be nice.
Not Mr. Bear Austria and Mr. Leather Europe. You're not being oppressed because you like
Why
leather.
are you saying we can't show this in schools, Callum? This goes against fundamental EU values. If Mr. Bear Austria doesn't get to indoctrinate your children.
But like Mr. Leather Europe, you're not being oppressed because of your love of leather. That's not what's going on there. And your love of leather is not sexuality.
Yeah.
This is not you being oppressed for love. This is you being oppressed because of your fetish.
So, so this latest amendment that's been submitted to the Parliament by Fidesz is a bill that punishes paedophilia. Oh, no. That's how they have to.
This harms the LGBTQ community. Like, don't write that. Just don't. Like,
yep. But anyway, obviously, this is being we're being told that this endangers the mental health of LGBTQI youngsters and prevents them from getting access to information and affirmative support. Well, what do they need to do? What do they need? The kids in school. Well, what do you need?
They're not kids. They're LGBTQIs.
Wow, I guess.
That's how the left sees them. They're just all alphabet people.
But yeah, anyway.
I also want to note the fact that they changed the acronym in the article multiple times already.
Oh, well, I mean, there's
It's LGBT there,
yeah.
LGBTQ up there, and LGBTQI here.
Sure, why not? just
Can't even keep their own story straight.
Yeah. But yeah, Poland is looking at this and thinking, hey, that sounds good. We can get the next one up, John. Polish ministers were like, hey, we should copy that law. Which is why the Dutch Prime Minister isn't going to manage to get his universal assent to kicking Hungary out.
What do you want to bet they actually just text each other?
Probably, yeah.
They're just like, yeah, based. Why not?
So Poland should copy a Hungarian law that bans schools from using materials seen as promoting homosexuality. Polish education minister has said, calling it LGBT ideology, which is correct.
See, that's why I'm worried. Because
that's what it is.
In Orban's language and the law's language there, if they're just saying, you can't
Gays.
be homosexual.
Yeah, that's
like
wrong
that.
now.
No, that's wrong. But say that you should not be
promoting LGBT ideology.
Leftist
Correct.
activism.
Exactly. Leftist activism. This law states that school lessons touching on questions of sexuality must not promote gender reassignment or homosexuality. We should copy these regulations on Polish soil in their entirety.
Poland's quite the place.
And you may remember that, of course, Poland has got self-declared LGBT-free zones, which, and they're very specific about this. It's about LGBT ideology that they have, they don't have. We are checking to see if there's a violation of EU treaties, say one EU official. Whining. How dare you not have this particular ideology? But the EU, this stood for quite some time, actually. And the EU is finally taking action. They're doubtless going to, if we can get to the next one, John, Pink News. I love the way that Pink News framed this. EU to finally take legal action against Poland over horrific LGBT-free zones. As in, there's no one here promoting our ideology. And that's horrific.
Sorry, these zones aren't like Jewish ghettos.
No, they have gay people in them. Like, they're just not promoting pride.
But like the way they're phrasing this, the horrific LGBT free zone, sort of sounds like it's the Uyghur Muslim, detention camps.
Yeah, no, they're not. They're not preventing gay people from going in these zones. They just don't promote leftist ideology in these zones, and that's very offensive. And so doubtless they'll be subject to all sorts of fines, and this will probably further hasten Poland leaving the European Union, which will doubtless further hasten Hungary leaving the European Union, and it will literally be after Britain has been like, yep, no, screw this, it's wrong on principle, so will everyone else have to flee the European Union as the sinking ship that it is. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.